The streets of Willow Creek were always quiet, especially at dusk. The sun would dip below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the small town, and the residents would retreat into their homes, shutting themselves in against the darkness. It was a ritual, one that had been repeated for generations, and it brought a sense of comfort to the townsfolk. But on this particular evening, something felt off. The silence was heavier, like a physical presence that hung in the air. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches tangling together like skeletal fingers, and the houses loomed, their windows watching like empty eyes. Sarah Jenkins felt it as she walked home from the library, her arms loaded with books on local history. She quickened her pace, her sneakers making soft crunching sounds on the gravel sidewalk. As she turned onto Elm Street, she noticed the usual lights that illuminated the street were out, plunging the street into an inky blackness. She hastened her step, her heart beating faster with each step. When she reached her small bungalow, she fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking slightly. As she pushed open the door, a faint humming noise drifted from within, like the gentle buzzing of a fly. Sarah's skin crawled, and she hesitated, wondering if she should investigate. But something compelled her to step inside, to confront the darkness that lurked within. She pushed open the door, and a faint scent of decay wafted out, like the stench of a slow-rotting corpse. As she stepped inside, the humming noise grew louder, a steady vibration that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. Sarah's eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light, and she saw that her living room was in disarray. Books lay scattered across the floor, their pages torn and crumpled. Furniture was overturned, and the air was thick with an acrid smell, like burned wiring. She took a step forward, her heart pounding, and that was when she saw them. They were gathered in the corner of the room, their faces twisted into grotesque grins. They seemed to be watching her, their eyes glinting with a cold, malevolent light. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she counted them, 7 in all. Their faces familiar and yet strange, like reflections in a funhouse mirror. They were the same people she saw every day on the streets of Willow Creek. The same people she had grown up with, worked with, and lived alongside. Mr. Jenkins, the postman, was there, his eyes wide and dead. Mrs. McGinnis, the librarian, was beside him, her smile stretched across her face like a ghastly clown's. They were all there, their faces distorted, their eyes empty and cold. Sarah's voice was trapped in her throat as she tried to speak, but her vocal cords seemed to have frozen. She took a step back, her eyes fixed on the group, and that was when she saw the thing in the center of the room. It was shaped like a man, but its skin was gray and papery, like the bark of an ancient tree. Its eyes were 2 black holes, sucking in the light around them, leaving only darkness in their wake. Its mouth was a thin, cruel line, and its presence seemed to fill the room, pressing in on Sarah from all sides. The humming noise grew louder still, until it was almost deafening, and Sarah felt herself being drawn toward the thing, as if it was exerting some kind of dark, twisted pull on her. She knew she had to get out, to run, but her legs seemed to be rooted to the spot, refusing to move. The thing's eyes seemed to bore into Sarah's soul, and she felt a chill run down her spine as it slowly raised a hand, its fingers long and bony. The humming noise reached a crescendo, and the air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. Sarah's vision began to blur, and she felt herself being pulled closer, as if the thing was exerting some kind of hypnotic control over her. She tried to look away, but her gaze was trapped, fixed on the thing's face. Its mouth opened, revealing a dark, cavernous void, and a cold, whispery voice spoke, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. "Welcome home, Sarah," it said. "We've been waiting for you." The room around her began to dissolve, the faces of her neighbors and friends blurring into a sea of twisted, inhuman visages. The air was thick with an unholy energy, and Sarah felt herself being pulled toward the void, as if she was being drawn into some ancient, eldritch realm. Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life, and the humming noise ceased. The room snapped back into focus, and Sarah found herself standing alone in her living room, the furniture upright, the books neatly stacked on the shelves. The faces of her neighbors were gone, replaced by the familiar comforts of her own home. But as she looked around, she knew that something was off. The air was still heavy with the scent of decay, and the shadows seemed to writhe and twist on the walls. Sarah's heart was still racing as she backed slowly toward the door, her eyes fixed on the spot where the thing had stood. She knew that she had to get out, to flee Willow Creek and never look back. But as she reached for the doorknob, she heard a faint whisper in her ear. "You'll never leave." The voice was soft, raspy, and seemed to come from all around her. Sarah spun around, but she was alone in the room. The whisper seemed to seep into her bones, sending a chill down her spine. She tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But as she turned back to the door, she felt a cold, clammy hand grasp her arm, pulling her back. Sarah tried to struggle, but the grip was like iron. She was spun around to face the thing, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly intensity. Its mouth was open, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and a voice like dry leaves whispered in her ear, "You'll never leave." The room began to spin, and Sarah felt herself being pulled back into the void, back into the realm of twisted faces and ancient, eldritch horrors. She knew she had to escape, but her body seemed heavy, unresponsive, as if she was trapped in a living nightmare. The thing's grip tightened, and Sarah felt her arm begin to numb, the circulation being squeezed off. She tried to scream, but her voice was trapped in her throat, silenced by some unseen force. As the darkness closed in, Sarah saw the faces of her neighbors, their eyes twisted into grotesque grins, their skin gray and decaying. They closed in, their mouths open, revealing jagged teeth, and their cold, dead eyes seemed to drink in her terror. In that moment, Sarah knew she was doomed. The town was alive, and it was devouring her, swallowing her whole into a realm of eternal darkness. The last thing she saw was the thing's face, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly fury, as the void closed in, and the darkness consumed her. The town of Willow Creek was quiet once more, the darkness retracting like a living entity back into the shadows. The streets were empty, the houses silent, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart and stitched back together again. But in the heart of the town, in the place where Sarah's bungalow once stood, a new structure arose. It was a monolith, twisted and gnarled, its surface etched with ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. The townspeople, their faces still twisted into grotesque grins, gathered around the monolith, their eyes aglow with an otherworldly light. They formed a circle, their hands clasped together, as if in some twisted mockery of a prayer. And in the center of the circle, the thing stood, its eyes blazing with an eldritch power. It raised its hands, and the air seemed to ripple and distort, as if reality itself was being warped and twisted. The townspeople began to chant, their voices rising to a crescendo, as the thing spoke in a language that was not of this world. The air seemed to thicken, the darkness coalescing into a living, breathing entity that pulsed with an ancient, malevolent power. As the ritual reached its climax, the town of Willow Creek seemed to dissolve into chaos, the very fabric of reality unraveling like a thread pulled from a sweater. And in the heart of the maelstrom, the thing stood, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly fury, as the darkness closed in to claim the world. The ritual reached its climax, and the air seemed to shatter like fragile glass. The townspeople, their faces twisted in ecstasy, screamed in unison as the thing's power surged to a fever pitch. The monolith, once a twisted, gnarled structure, began to glow with an otherworldly energy. The symbols etched into its surface pulsed with a fierce, malevolent light, as if they were alive and feeding off the chaos. The darkness, now a living entity, began to take shape. Tendrils of shadow snaked out from the monolith, wrapping around the townspeople like tentacles. They screamed in rapture, their eyes aglow with an unholy light, as the darkness consumed them whole. The thing, its power at its zenith, spoke in a voice that was both ancient and eternal. "The veil is torn," it declared, its words echoing through the shattered remnants of reality. "The old ones return." As the ritual reached its conclusion, The town of Willow Creek was no more. In its place stood a twisted, nightmarish realm, a domain of eternal darkness where the laws of reality no longer applied. The thing, now a god in its own right, stood at the apex of this twisted realm, its eyes blazing with an eldritch power that seemed to defy the very fabric of existence. And in the darkness, the townspeople, now mere puppets of the thing's twisted will, screamed in eternal agony, their souls forever trapped in this abyss of madness. The world beyond Willow Creek was unaware of the horrors that lurked in the shadows, unaware that the boundaries between reality and madness had been torn asunder. But as the darkness spread, creeping like a cancer across the face of the earth, the world would soon learn to tremble at the name of Willow Creek, a place where the very fabric of reality had been torn apart to reveal the horrors that lurked beyond.